Thank you again for tuning in today for our first CBS Experience Series webinar. My name is Kate. I am thrilled to be joined by many of my colleagues and current students and to highlight our Tamer Center for Social Enterprise today. We are going to kick off with some introductions, dive into the Tamer Center and the resources, and then kick it to our students to share a little bit about how they've taken advantage of the Tamer Center. Again, my name is Kate Murphy. I am really excited to be kicking off this new series where we intend to highlight various centers, programs, and initiatives across the Columbia Business School landscape. And today, again, is the first one, and I will turn it over to Dan to introduce himself from the Tamer Center. Thank you, Dan.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kate. I'm really excited to do this and really excited to hopefully get to know many of you. We're always open for any communication, so please feel free to ping us afterwards. Just a quick few words about myself. My name is Dan Wong, and I'm a professor at Columbia Business School, where I've taught for the past 10 years. And currently, I also lead as the faculty co-director of the Tamer Center for Social Enterprise, something that I'm so proud of, in particular, the folks I get to work with and the students I get to work with. Just a couple things aside from my role at the Tamer Center, which I'll talk about, is that I teach at CBS the strategy courses, namely the core strategy class that everyone has to take, as well as a class on technology strategy. And that's largely as well what I've worked in and also researched in the past. The reason why being at the Tamer Center is so special to me, however, is that a big part of my research is about business and society, in particular, the effects of social activism and global migration on business strategy decisions. And so a lot of that I see in the passion of our students as well. And so if you're interested in those topics, happy to talk to you, but I'm sure we'll have a lot to discuss this time. I'm going to kick it over to Sandra, who is our managing director.
Thanks, Dan. Excited to see so many of you join us today. Thank you for your interest in the Tamer Center and Columbia Business School. As you can see, I'm Australian, so that's where my slight accent comes from. And, you know, I think it was in your position for a lot of our prospective students looking at different business schools now 2 decades ago, and applied to Columbia Business School, but had a background at that time in econ. I had done law in Australia as well as management consulting. And, you know, really looked at a lot at the US business schools and international business schools as well, coming from Australia. But after Columbia Business School, did not do the expected thing and joined the school to help grow the then social enterprise program, and have been here ever since. Now, you know, my focus is on the center and its growth, and it's a really different program than the one that I started so many years ago. But I'm also now teaching in the re-entry acceleration program, which we'll talk a little bit more about later on in this presentation. And I guess my fun fact is planning to go to Antarctica end of this year. With that, I'll throw it to our students.
Thanks, Sandra. It's a great pleasure to be here as well, and always to see such great numbers of people who, you know, find a place for social enterprise at a business school. But my name is Ugochukwu Wadiani. I go by Ugo for short. I'm from Lagos, Nigeria, which is where I grew up, and which is where I started my career as well. Spent 3 years as a business analyst at McKinsey in the Lagos office, and moved to New York in 2020 to work with the UN on clean energy policy. And it was during my time at the UN that I decided I wanted to focus a lot more on clean energy and climate finance, and Colombia was top of my list for that reason. And so came to CBS to do my MBA. My previous summer internship with JP Morgan was also a big part of making that transition, where I spent about 10 weeks working with the power and renewables team as the beginning of that transition towards a longer term career in energy and climate finance. And so, you know, very excited to talk about all things climate and finance as it relates to the opportunities at CBS. I'll just wrap up by saying my own fun fact is I used to write and produce music. Decided very early that that's probably not a career path I want to pursue, but always very happy to talk about music as well. I'll pass that over to Daniel now.
Thanks very much. Yeah, very international cohort here. I'm from London in the UK, but I've been living in New York for the past 4 years. Prior to CBS, as you can see, I worked in artificial intelligence. I worked in a startup from sort of 10, and I left at about 300 people. We raised some C to C, Series D funding. I'm a J-termer, so my internship program is slightly different. That we only get 4 weeks off over summer. So this summer, I actually worked with the Tamer Center on a project with Bruce Usher around generative AI. And post CBS, my plan is to work in climate tech. So go back into kind of working in startups. And my fun fact is that I'm a tri-citizen of the UK, New Zealand, and South Africa. So just to really put my hat on things, then that's it from me.
All right, thanks so much. As you can tell, we are really enthusiastic about being here and getting to tell you as much as we can in the short time we have together about the Tamer Center. So I'm responsible for the introduction, and let me say that it's really a privilege to be involved in the Tamer Center in any way. And that is because over my 10 years at CBS, there's been this dramatic shift in the way that folks talk about the role of business in society. A lot of that has to do with perhaps the macro-social, macroeconomic effects of how business and society becoming more and more intertwined. But at the same time, we also see so much of the conversation driven by not just the faculty who are generating ideas at the leading edge of understanding the intersections of how business can impact the natural environment and the other way around, as well as local communities, but also by our students. And I think what I've seen is that the conversation has bled into all different aspects of social and community life at Columbia Business School. And so although I think you're getting to see Ugo and Daniel as two of students that we're incredibly proud of, they have so much to share with all of you. I think they would both tell you, and Sandra in addition would tell you, that kind of topics that are top of mind related to social impact and environmental impact are everywhere at CBS. I mean, they enter into all different kinds of coursework, different kinds of conversations about internships, about future careers. This is one of the things, one of the topics, and one of the areas that students care the most about. And a lot of that, it means that the Tamer Center has been responsible for so much of the activity and curating what student life is like, and not just within the classroom, but also all in aspects of the community. And so on the one hand, although we produce a lot of the material that you'll read in your classrooms, not just in the classes that are specifically about social impact and environmental impact and climate change, but also in classes like accounting and strategy and managerial economics, you'll see topics related to social impact as well as the main topics that those classes cover. In addition, what the Tamer Center does as the center that coordinates all this activity within that domain is that we also help students get involved in terms of other activities that are outside of CBS through a large number of partnerships that we've cultivated over the years. A lot of our students are situated in positions that allow them to work directly with impact investment funds, work directly with, say, accelerators that are trying to help marginalized founders, that are working directly with startups that are addressing kind of the climate change problem. And so our students not only kind of get educated in the classroom, but they are abundant opportunities for them to experience and put into practice what they learn in our halls here. In addition to that, the network isn't just with partner organizations around New York and the world, but we have lots of alumni who are invested in helping our students as well with their careers. Even if you are thinking about a career that's not directly in the social or impact or climate change space, lots of our alums are working in areas that can help you understand how you might be able to make a difference or be oriented in that direction in any kind of position. And so in these kinds of areas that you see before you on the slide, the Tamer Center has made a real impact, and we hope that you'll be interested in taking part if we see you in the fall. In the next slide, I think what you'll see is a more kind of a more distilled expression of what it is exactly our mission is. The way that you can think of the Tamer Center is that we have two big content areas. It is called the Tamer Center for Social Enterprise, but we have a lot of programming that's specifically dedicated to the impact of climate change on business, and in turn the other way around, what business leaders can do to address the climate change set of issues as well. well. On the other side, we also have a number of programs that address kind of community opportunities, social enterprise, social impact, questions that relate to economic inequality, social exclusion, not just locally, but also globally. And the folks that you see here on our panel will talk more about the specifics of those programs. This is not to say that the Tamer Center, however, is kind of split into two halves. So much of our programming integrates climate change and social impact because so many of the issues are not just about social justice, but also environmental justice. And we are hoping that we're helping our students cultivate a way to think about that as business leaders throughout their time at CBS and also beyond as well. Let me talk more specifically about some of these programs on the next slide. And these kinds of programs are specifically career related. So the Summer Fellowship, Social Venture Fund, networking opportunities, loan assistance, they're all about helping students and facilitating the process and lowering the barriers for them to work directly in social and environmental impact. The Summer Fellowship, for example, is offered to students who get an internship offer, for example, working directly with, say, a nonprofit or an impact-minded firm where the compensation might not be what you might expect in the private sector, for example. But the fellowship encourages students to do that by offsetting some of those costs. The loan assistance program as well, as you can see on the slide before you, helps our students with their loans, if they happen to have any, if they work in an impact-related sector, in the public sector as well, and we help them pay off their loans as well. Networking opportunities help students for years beyond their time at CBS, and the Social Venture Fund is directly for our community of students and alums who have an idea that they want to try out, that it doesn't have to be a nonprofit. In fact, many of the kind of ventures that are proposed through this program are not nonprofits, but they're dedicated to making social and environmental impact, and we fund a series of seed grants for ventures that enter our competition every semester for $25,000. And there's a comprehensive process that we use to do that as well. You can find information about all of this on our website as well. These are programs that I'm really, really excited about. But I'm also excited about, on the next slide, some of our newer initiatives. And so I'm going to turn it over to Sandra to talk about the remaining three initiatives, but I'm going to start in talking about something that we just launched last school year called the Inclusive Entrepreneurship Initiative, which is on the next slide that you'll see. The Inclusive Entrepreneurship Initiative is a set of programs mostly coordinated with partners that are around New York and also locally in West Harlem, which is where Columbia Business School is. And the objective is to put students in kind of positions so that they can take part in creating venture ecosystems in local communities with the goal of bridging social, digital, and economic divides. And what we do is that we have teams of MBA students who are working directly with, say, venture capital funds or accelerators that are in the area. Most of them are local to New York, with the goal of addressing issues related to lack of access to, say, financial resources for founders who might not come from privileged circumstances. They also kind of help with training entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs who similarly might come from marginalized communities, who might know that they want to start a company, but the nuts and bolts of getting there aren't quite there yet. And so the objective of the Inclusive Entrepreneurship Initiative is to build a bridge between CBS and address gaps in knowledge, mentorship, and also financial resources as well. And I'm really excited about this year's iteration where we're going to have a number of MBA student teams work directly with the management teams of VC funds and venture accelerators that are dedicated to promoting this goal and working really hard at it as well. And so there's a lot of activity in that area, but it's all related to the rest of the program that you'll see as well. One that I think I absolutely cannot get over in terms of its impact is something that Sandra, my colleague, will talk about on the very next slide, which is our reentry acceleration program.
So this is a program that's designed to immerse MBA and executive MBA students who haven't necessarily been exposed to the criminal justice system with an opportunity that business leaders uniquely have a role to play, which is around creating entrepreneurship, as well as career track employment opportunities for people who have justice involvement. It's interesting that Columbia University, we're a very liberal campus in New York City, but when we asked our campus colleagues, what should the business school be doing around the mass incarceration crisis? And the resounding answer that came back was focus on employment and entrepreneurship. It's what the business school can uniquely do. I saw there was a question about someone with a teacher's background and how diverse the backgrounds are of people who are coming into the business school who are interested in social enterprise. And this is an example where we've had former MBA students with teaching experience, but also it's not a requirement to participate. Basically, we're doing programs at both Sing Sing Correctional and Bedford Correctional facilities, one men's, one women's facility, where we're teaching business courses. This semester, financial empowerment, that is personal finance. Financial literacy is something that unfortunately is not taught really in high schools, but every single person really needs to understand those skills. And so MBA students are going in teaching that course this semester, and next semester we'll be teaching entrepreneurship. We also advise a joint program called Justice Through Code, where we're training formerly incarcerated people with coding and interpersonal skills to get into career track developer jobs. So hugely impactful, and it's something that our MBA students who participate in this report as one of the most meaningful things that they do at Columbia Business School. Similarly, this summer we actually launched a series called Startup Works. It's a pilot series where we're encouraging justice-involved team formations to come together and work on startup ideas, but mixed with people with more diverse backgrounds. So not just formerly incarcerated people, but that we know from research that diversity really helps strengthen teams. And so it's an opportunity for people across the campus, as well as at the business school, to both participate in the teams and also advise the team. So a lot of REAP alums have come back to help launch that program. So, you know, this is an example of an immersion experience that's quite unique that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. On the next slide, moving on to our climate change and business initiative. This is a huge area of growth for the center and also Columbia Business School. Our dean, Costis Maglaris, has named business and climate change as one of his top strategic priority areas. And so this is an area where there's a huge amount of growth. So for those of you who are interested in this space, you know, we're a terrific place to really deepen your exposure to many different pathways, but we really need the best and brightest who come through business schools to be working in this space. It's a mix of curricular initiatives. We have a new gateway course that was launched this fall, as well as many more electives, including climate tech, climate policy, climate risk, ESG. If you're interested in the slate of courses, please look at our website. We have a lot of experiential learning programs, the 3 Cairns Fellowship, which is real world projects working with firms and faculty across campus. The Climate Knowledge Initiative is a new one that's coming down the pipeline. It'll be an open source platform looking at 15 to 20 fields, both sectors and solutions, and all open source information for people in business who are trying to get up to speed quickly about how to get to net zero as quickly as possible. So a lot of terrific programming that MBAs and executive MBAs are both helping to build as well as participate and learn from. So on to the next slide. Moving along, we also have another program called Capital for Good. This explores the full spectrum of capital in all of its variations and forms. And it's similarly to a lot of our other programs. It's both curricular, extracurricular, research activities, and alumni networking. And on the next slide, when we talk about spectrum of capital, if we can move the slide, this is sort of a way we think about the landscape. You would have, maybe for those of you who are familiar with this space, have seen similar spectrum slides, but you can see on one end you start from pure profit-driven conventional investments through to on the other side of the spectrum, philanthropy, you know, purely focused on impact. And I think at Columbia Business School, what you have an opportunity to get exposed to is the full spectrum of tools and techniques and innovations across the capital spectrum. And the way I think about this is if, for example, you're building, say, a building, and you have a toolkit, you don't just have a hammer, right? You don't just have ESG investing. I think the approach we think about is you're trying to solve a problem. You use the appropriate tool that is needed for that specific part of the system that you're trying to tackle. And we think of all of these areas as being something that a well-rounded MBA should understand, even if you have a specific interest in maybe deepening your career and, say, impact investing or ESG, maybe your focus. It's still helpful to understand the full capital stack. And that's sort of how we think about what sort of courses and experiential learning opportunities that students might have access to. On the next slide, this is an example of not all, but some of the terrific electives that are on offer at Columbia Business School. These are purely MBA, not stuff that's necessarily listed at other schools, but there is obviously an opportunity if you're interested to take courses at other schools. We just wanted to sort of highlight things that are offered purely at Columbia Business School on this slide. And if you're interested, you can click through on our website and download the syllabus. We make everything very publicly available, not behind firewalls, because we believe the curriculum is something that, should be an important part of your experience. Yes, networking is important and experiential learning, but you're also here to learn and to deepen with some of our terrific faculty, both research and adjuncts that we have the blessing being in New York City to be able to tap into. On the next slide, this is a career course map, a bit too small to maybe read online, but you can download and take a look. It's a way of presenting this information, but mapped to different career pathways that you might be interested in. And so this is being updated on a regular basis. If you're curious, you can take a look online for more detailed information. On the next slide, this is a slide sort of talking about how we think of the center in some ways as a platform or an umbrella for incredible student initiatives that take place primarily under the Social Enterprise Club and the Green Business Club. And under, for example, the Social Enterprise Club, there are a lot of other subgroups and opportunities for all of you, if you come to Columbia Business School, to participate and really deepen, especially in the experiential learning, networking, career sort of activities. So a lot of different groups, incredible student sort of engagement and energy. And I think with that might be the slide to transition to our students and their experiences around some of these experiential learning programs. Oh, maybe this one is me too, unless Ugo or Daniel, you participate in MBLP. The nonprofit board program is sort of an example of something that really leverages Columbia Business School's unique placement in New York City as an Ivy League institution. We have tremendous connections to alumni who sit on nonprofit boards. For example, the Lincoln Center for the Arts was a really popular organization where we have a board member, and students really have an opportunity to both be an observer, board status, to learn about board governance, and also contribute to the organization with a project that's relevant to the board member and the executive director. So I think, New York City being an incredible incubator for social and environmental impact. Like, this is sort of a program which shows and showcases the sort of connections that you can access through Columbia Business School. On the next slide, Pangaea Advisors. Ugo, maybe, no, you didn't? Okay, Microlumbia, right? So Pangaea Advisors is the pro bono international development consulting initiative. It's part of the Social Enterprise Club. It's an opportunity to do real field work and work with organizations in developing countries, Africa, Asia, etc., and Latin America, to really sort of put to practice what you're learning in the classroom. Pangaea has had a very long history at Columbia Business School. I think for sort of obvious reasons by our location, we attract an incredible international audience, sort of reflected by all of us on this webinar today. We're all from, have country connections in other parts of the world. And this is a really strong program for us where, it's quite meaningful to be able to apply what you learn in the MBA program to really help organizations that wouldn't otherwise have access to the talent and skill sets of a Columbia MBA team. I think that might be going to the next slide. I think, going to the student experience. There we go.
Great. No, thanks for that, Sandra. Maybe I'll just start by talking on the courses and the curriculum, because I think for me personally, that was such a big part of coming to Columbia. And I say emphasis on Columbia, not just Columbia Business School, because the great thing is, this big focus on climate and sustainability is not just in the business school, it's Columbia-wide. And I think like Sandra mentioned, there are a lot of great electives you can take at the business school, but there's also opportunities to take classes at a lot of the other schools as well, which was a big reason why I came here. Just before this webinar, I came back from a class at the policy school on financing the energy transition, hoping to take something on energy policy at the law school next year as well. And so I think you can think of CBS as a great way to become someone who has a business focus and is really interested in climate and sustainability. But I think there's so much more on offer beyond just the business school as well, that Columbia more broadly offers. Obviously, speaking about the business school itself, again, like Professor Wang and Sandra mentioned, there are a lot of great electives. I'm currently taking one on business and climate change. I'm hoping to take one on climate finance starting next month as well. There are a lot of interesting ones around climate tech, climate policy. And so there's experiential learning for sure, but I think a lot of that is supplemented by what we learn in the classroom, which we're then able to take to a lot of these consulting projects, impact investing projects, to then actually test a lot of what we're learning. I think in terms of club affiliations, as relates to the Tamer Center, I'm the co-president for MyColumbia this year. And MyColumbia is essentially the impact investing fund at Columbia Business School, which is, fully student-run, but also reports to an external board, which helps manage the fact that you have the student leadership changing year on year. And so there's that sense of continuity over the years. It's existed for 15 years now. It was a big part of why I came to CBS in the first place, because I wanted to get that experiential learning, and was a big part of my first year. Got to work on a deal with a health fintech company in Kenya. Again, that meant so much to me, being African myself, that I could do work related to the continent, and was one of the reasons why I decided to become co-president this year. This year, we also have a lot of big plans around, increasing our AUM, expanding our investment thesis as well. We developed a climate investment thesis earlier this year, and so we're hoping to actually find deals globally to actually operationalize that this year. And so MyColumbia has been such a big part of my experience at CBS, not just my first year, but here. And we've been spending a lot of time thinking on how we continue to grow the fund. So it also is a great attraction for people who are hoping to come to business school to learn what it is to be an impact investor, building on the theme of capital for good. Beyond just MyColumbia, have also participated in a lot of the other fellowships that were mentioned. So last year I was a 3 Currents Fellow. It's essentially a climate fellowship where you get to form teams of, it could be an individual, but you also get to form teams of up to 4 people and essentially consult with, either a company working in the climate space. It could be a VC fund, it could be an accelerator. And so last year I worked with a group of 3 other classmates. So there were 4 of us with a company called New Lab here in New York. They're essentially an accelerator that also has a venture capital arm called New System Ventures. And we actually helped them develop their energy investment thesis, which again, on the one hand, was such a great way for us to just learn the universe of everything you can put capital towards as it relates to the energy transition. But also we were helping a company actually figure out where to deploy that capital as well. And so not only were we learning, but we were taking what we're learning to actually help people make a difference out there, which again is such a constant theme of all of the experiential opportunities available at CBS. Definitely also helped that it was a fellowship, and so we all got some money at the end of the day. Wasn't anything too grand, but definitely helped me buy my ticket back home to see my family in December. So it was kind of a win-win all around. But New Lab is also one of the companies, interestingly enough, that's part of the Inclusive Entrepreneurship Fellowship this year. And so myself and another group have kind of applied to that to kind of continue our partnership with them. The last thing I'll just touch on is the Columbia Energy Symposium, which isn't necessarily housed by the Tamer Center, but I think for me it was a great opportunity to collaborate with students from all the other schools. It's an annual symposium that's organized by students, usually led by the business school, the climate school, and the policy school. Sometimes engineering, law, they also get involved. But I really wanted to get involved in this because I felt like I had a lot of experience from my time at the UN on just the state of the energy transition globally. And I wanted to really contribute to shaping that agenda. As you can imagine, climate was a big part of the discussion at the symposium as well. And so again, was just kind of a great opportunity to meet people with similar interests across all of the other schools, deepen those relationships, but also really get to shape a lot of the conversations around energy, climate, the energy transition right now. I've been very involved, as you can tell, but this is also just a very small subset of what the Tamer Center has to offer for someone like me who is really passionate about, energy, climate, and how all of that intersects with finance. And I'm sure Daniel, who I'll hand it over now, can also share some of the great things he's been working on with the center.
Tough act to follow. I'm not sure what you didn't do at Columbia this year, but no, I'm very happy to help. So as I said, I'm a J-termer, so I joined in January, so we have a slightly different timeline to Ugo, I think. But I'm a VP on the Green Business Club, which is something I was really keen to get involved in. And I'm sure you kind of gleaned from everyone talking today, there's a huge amount of effort and work going into that aspect of Columbia at the moment. So be it new electives or core courses being introduced, there's a huge amount of speakers coming through. So being part of the Green Business Club for me is a great way to build network within Columbia, but also understand the landscape of roles that are emerging as we speak right now. And as well as that, I am now a 3 Kens Fellow, which is exactly what Ugo did last year. I've just been accepted onto the program, which is great. I think in terms of the electives and the broader offering at Columbia, I mean, I would say this, and I know we're on the call to discuss all things Tamer, but they really are some of the most knowledgeable people within Columbia, and the network that they have, the resources. It's been amazing to get access to it. So this summer when I was interning as a Tamer Fellow itself, I was amazed to the amount of connections that were made to me upon just asking one person. And as that kind of expanded, so many doors and email addresses were sent to me. It was fantastic. So I think there's a huge amount that you can do just by working with the very people on this call itself, as well as if you are, when you do come to Columbia, you'll see the opportunities that exist beyond that as well. And, be it sort of leadership series talks like I heard from Silfen, case competitions, there's huge amounts of opportunity. And I would really encourage you all to, really look into all those things, as I'm sure there's a huge amount of opportunity for you as you come to Columbia as well.
Thank you all so much. We really appreciate you sharing your background and more about the Tamer Center for Social Enterprise. And with that, we are going to do some live Q&A. So for folks tuning in, please feel free to type any questions that you might have for our panelists into the Q&A box, and I will read them verbally to our panelists. We'll get through as many as we can in the next 20 or so minutes. So I'm going to start with you, Sandra. A couple questions came in following up on REAP. Are there any prerequisites or selection criteria to be able to participate in that program?
So we have an application form that we ask students to apply to, and it's really the real filtering is a prerequisite course. So we ask people to take a half block week. It's a 1.5 day course that runs in late August, which looks at the causes and consequences of mass incarceration. It's actually taught by our former co-director, Damon Phillips, and that class really gives you a conceptual grounding into these issues, because we don't send our MBA students into the prisons to go teach these classes without some context as to what circumstances created this situation in the first place. You don't need to have a teaching background. My job and the class that I teach in a follow-on called REAP Immersion is where I train all of our instructors to learn how to teach and how to teach case method, Socratic method style. So it's I think if you've ever done any teaching before, that you often learn the subjects better than your students, right? Because the ability to explain and to tutor around these concepts. So, it's also an opportunity for a lot of MBAs to learn about personal finance and entrepreneurship and things like that. So it's a great experience, but, we're really just looking for openness and willingness to learn about these issues and engage, and an interest in teaching, also advising. We do some advising for formerly incarcerated students as well.
Excellent, thank you. And another question did come in asking if the MBA students do in fact get the opportunity to teach the classes. So thank you for answering that one as well. Maybe I can direct this question to you, Dan. Could you share some successful cases or projects from the Tamer Center that can really demonstrate the impact in the area of social enterprise or climate change?
Oh, definitely. Thanks for that question. We would be here all afternoon if I got my list out, but let me just mention two in particular. So I'll mention one that I know Sandra is very familiar with. A few years ago, the Tamer Fund for Social Ventures, this is something that I talked about, which is a $25,000 seed grant for a social venture, an impact-minded venture that's founded by anyone with a Columbia affiliation. One of our former MBA students founded a company called KT, and this is a company that creates, the easiest way to put it is a greenhouse in a box. And so what this does is that it allows smaller farmers in all parts of the world, but his market focus is India, to become more efficient at farming in a more sustainable way, and in a low-cost way as well. And the reason why it isn't just a market solution is that it has resource constraints in mind. For many smaller farmers, especially in South Asia, there's a big problem of access to resources. And so this was an approach that was pioneered by others in the market, but was scaled up by KT, the company, KHEYTI, if you want to take a look at the company, that has had a lot of success. In fact, last year, 2022, it was the winner of a $1 million prize from the Prince William Institute. And it was wonderful to kind of see their progress. And we're really proud of the work that they're doing, as well as a lot of the other climate-focused ventures that have come through the seed grant program, the Tamer Fund. Another case, another company that I would often highlight, and I saw a question that was in the chat about that as well. I think from Eric. Is a company called Dollar Ride. Dollar Ride is a company that offers ride pooling or shared ride services for transit deserts, especially across New York. Even though New York City has one of the most robust public transit systems in the world, there are many parts of New York that are not serviced by subway stations or even bus stations. And so in a lot of these transit deserts, there is a system of what has often been referred to as dollar vans, folks, solopreneurs, individuals who operate vans and sometimes van fleets for low costs, getting people from point A to point B. The routes are sometimes are often not known if it's your first time in the neighborhood. It's only locals who know some of these routes, but they are a really important. They fill a really important need in some of these communities. But the issue is that it's very difficult for some of these fleet operators as well as van drivers to scale their business and to build wealth and economic security. And so Sue Sani and a couple of his co-founders applied to the Tamer Fund a few years ago for their idea, which they called Dollar Ride, and it offered a technology platform solution so that van fleet owners as well as van owners who service these areas could actually get riders via an app. It made it much easier for riders to also hail some some of these ride sharing services as well. And these are places that Uber, Lyft drivers don't typically go. And so he's been able to grow that platform as well, such that last year he was also the recipient of a grant from the New York State to electrify the vehicles that are often in some of these fleets. And so I believe Dollar Ride was not in New Lab as a cohort participant, but he was the company was in another similar accelerator called Urban X. And they were once a Tamer Fund recipient as well. In addition to that, we also are in the process of writing a case about Dollar Ride. And so the story of Dollar Ride and the strategic dilemmas that they are facing is something that will be taught to all of our students as well, to help them understand the complexity and also the opportunity for that some of these issues surface.
Thank you so much. Lots of questions coming in about the Three Carnes Fellowship, given both of our students mentioned it. So Ugo or Daniel, or if both of you, would you mind just giving a little bit more context to the requirements for the program, how you were selected for it, and what that means now that you have been selected?
Sure, I'm happy to go first. So I don't think there's any strict criteria per se in terms of, you have to have X or Y. When you're filling out the application, essentially they're going to ask you, what do you feel, or what skills or past experiences do you feel like you and your team have that might, work for this project? And I think it's up to you to kind of highlight, the skills you think are relevant. A lot of us on my team had like prior consulting experience, not necessarily in the area of climate, but we communicated that we felt like we had, that consulting skill set that could help us define the problem that the client was facing and figure out solutions from there. We also added that we had a very strong passion for climate, right? And so if we needed to learn anything on the go, we kind of beat our chest that we would be able to learn it to help them out at the end of the day. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but I don't say there's anything in particular required apart from just like being passionate about the topic and being able to communicate why you're passionate about it and why you want to work with that client. Obviously, the topic of climate is very broad. And so on the one hand, I worked with New Lab, which is an accelerator stroke VC. I know some of my classmates worked with companies that were focused on agriculture, other areas that had a kind of climate angle to it. And so I think regardless of what you've done in the past, there's probably something you can get involved in. And so the onus is really on you to kind of communicate why you feel you're a good fit for that project. Because on the one hand, yes, you are kind of getting the experience to learn, but you're also actually trying to contribute to a company that's actually doing real business, really trying to make a difference on whether it's their own like society around them or their bottom line or usually both of them. And so you also need to be able to communicate why you feel you have the skills or the experiences or the passion that actually help make the project a success. I think obviously a big part of what helps as well is the fact that you're working in a team. And so as much as you can find people that have different skill sets that also complement what you have, you can then also paint that picture of, as a team, when we come together, we have all of these different boxes that are ticked that kind of make us the best team for this project. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Daniel.
No, I think you covered it off. I mean, all I would say is that the kinds of projects offered are diverse, so they can suit people who have more technical backgrounds or people who are better in this sort of consulting type remit. So I wouldn't worry too much about if I don't have a certain kind of skill set or background. There's sort of 10 or 12 projects which normally cater to just about everyone in the room, and then if you're really struggling to say yourself, it's more about how you will learn and how you work with others to collaborate. So I wouldn't worry too much. If you're doing the J term, you have kind of one shot at it. And if you're in the sort of 2-year MBA, you have 2 years to get onto a project you're interested in. So it's definitely something that I would encourage people to seek out once they come in.
Another question, Daniel, that did come in was how you've been able to leverage the program and the Tamer Center as a J-term student. How has that experience been for you?
Yeah, I think that everyone at the Tamer Center has been fantastic with me. I think as a J-term student, the impetus is maybe on you slightly when you first start to kind of get to grips with who is everyone and where the resources are. Certainly because we don't have the sort of 8 to 10 week period in the summer to do an internship. That's where there are lots of opportunities to work on campus, do internships with people on campus, or seek out professors for independent study, which that's probably opening another can of worms here. But certainly in terms of what you can do within as a J-term student, I don't think it hinders you at all. I think if anything, I was at least coming into Columbia as a 31-year-old. So I was a bit more focused on what I was trying to get out of it. But certainly, there's no stone that you can't leave unturned within the first couple of weeks or first couple of months to make sure you're getting the best experience.
Great, thank you. Sandra or Dan, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how Tamer collaborates with other centers on campus, specifically the Lang Center. There's a lot of questions. If I want to launch a startup in the social enterprise space, how do you work with the Lang Center?
Shall I take that one, Dan? So yeah, we literally sit at 2 doors from each other. And so the way I think of Columbia Business School is, it's like this massive menu of things that you can pick, right? And you need to know what it is you like so that you can curate the experience and customize it to your interests. And so I think of the people who are working on their ventures, they get so much value out of Columbia Business School and the experience because they know exactly what it is that they're trying to build or create or start. That every class, every connection, student experience, every project can be, in some ways dovetailed into the thing you're trying to build. And so I think people who are entrepreneurial aspirations and are trying to work on a specific idea are really terrific in curating their experience at Columbia Business School and picking things that are relevant to the direction that they want to take their venture. So definitely, everything that is offered under Lang Center and Tamer Center, that people with entrepreneurial inclinations will take advantage of everything that's on offer. And also, as I think Ugo mentioned, all the stuff that's happening across the campus. I mean, there's an incredible ecosystem of incubators and accelerators and events and things happening at the engineering school, the startup lab, and it's a little bit drinking from a fire hose experience, but, equally important is saying no to stuff, right? Like if your heart is really in one area, to not spread yourself too thin. I think that's sort of the blessing and curse of being in New York City. It's just a very resource rich environment, and you really need to curate your experience and know what it is you want to get out of Columbia Business School.
Yeah, I think Sandra said it wonderfully well. Let me also say that we, in addition to the Lang Center, we collaborate with organizations, units across Columbia University as well. But even just staying within CBS, many of the startups that are launched by CBS students have a technology focus, and we frequently interface with the student tech clubs as well as some of the other technology-related clubs as well. As a person who teaches about technology, responsible technology, the social impact of tech and responsible AI form a huge part of my own curriculum that the students get exposed to here. And so in many ways, it's very natural for the Tamer Center to engage in that conversation as well. And there are also ways for students who don't have a lot of experience in tech to actually understand and learn through experiences like, say, volunteering or helping out. I think it either already happened or it's about to happen. We're running a hackathon in collaboration with Girls in Tech, and it's a way for our students to kind of mentor folks who are entering this space and to learn about it themselves as well. Our social enterprise conference, which is happening at the end of this month, the kickoff panel is one about responsible AI and tech. And so there are lots of different entry points for students who are heavily involved in the Tamer Center to also develop connections to the other kind of centers and institutes on campus.
And I think to just add, it's also the nature of these topics. For example, ESG. I mean, if this topic is coming up with the Japan Center, with the Value Investing Center, Columbia Women in Business has done panels on ESG. It's not just that it's a little enclave that's only the Tamer Center. Similarly with climate change, it's going to affect every single sector, field, function area, marketing, operations, strategy, et cetera, et cetera. So these things are being infused across not just Columbia Business School, but across the campus by the nature of what, how knotty these social environmental problems are. You need interdisciplinary mixing and different perspectives to be able to come to really rigorous solutions that can be scaled. So I think that's the advantage of coming to a place like Columbia University and Columbia Business School, in being able to access so many resources from lots of different parts of the campus.
Thank you both. Ugo, would you mind sharing some more details about Microlumbia and your involvement?
Sure. I don't know if there's any specific detail you want me to share. I think I saw a question on how we source deals, but I guess the short answer to that is, Microlumbia operates as a typical venture fund, right? What does that mean? It means, as it relates to sourcing deals, it could be a mix of reaching out to companies proactively on LinkedIn, looking out to other co-investors to be like, are there deals you've passed on that might be interesting to us, attending industry conferences, leveraging relationships as well. Anyone who's worked in venture capital will tell you it's a very entrepreneurial space. And so at Microlumbia, it's no different, where it's not any one way we think about sourcing deals. It's all of the above. But I think beyond that is also, again, with every typical venture fund you find, you can imagine a funnel where if you source 100 deals, maybe only like 50 make it to like diligence stage. Maybe the investment committee only approves like 2 to 5 at the end of the day, right? That's how things typically work. Because as much as it's student run, we do have an external board of alums who have led Microlumbia over the years. A lot of them are pretty senior in industry now. And so they themselves have different committees, the finance committee, the investment committee, that also are looking at different areas of the fund. And so it does run like a typical fund. Anyone who joins in their first year and is interested in investing will probably join as an investment associate, which means you get to work on not just sourcing deals, but also, doing live diligence as well, and hopefully getting one of your deals over the line. I think beyond just being an investment associate, there's opportunities for students with other interests to be involved. And so, you could join the impact measurement team that just focuses a lot more on assessing the impact of our investments. You could join the fundraising team, which is, basically focused on helping us increase our AUM. You could join the operations team to help with like back-end operations. Our investment teams are also structured regionally. So in my first year, I was on the Africa and Middle East team. There's a North America and Europe team, there's Asia, there's Latin America. And so, yeah, I guess the short thing is it's structured like an actual fund, which is one of the great things as well. Because for someone like me who has, hopes of one day running a fund, for me, it's just been such a great experience to kind of think about not just the investment part, which is what people often focus on, but how fundraising feeds investments, how, operations kind of supports that as well. When you need to recruit talent, how do you think about, interviewing them as well? And all of the above. And so, like I said earlier, a great way for someone who's interested in impact investing to already get involved. And I think, as with many things at CBS, you don't have to have any like particular prior experience to get involved, right? I think the idea is it's supposed to be something for students that are really interested in a future in impact investing to learn about what it's like to be an impact investor through experiential learning. And so I think the team this year as well has also taken on that education piece very seriously. We've just come off running, 2 sessions of training for investment associates where the board also got involved. We've developed an investment guide as well. So anyone who joins without any investment experience can already pick that up and have a sense of how we think about investing, all the way from sourcing deals, all the way to the end. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity to learn from Microlumbia. I think the last thing I'll just say as well is you have my name now. So please feel free to like reach out to me on LinkedIn or whatever if you're interested in discussing Microlumbia in more detail. It's something I did before I started. I reached out to the co-president at the time, the summer before I started at Columbia, and I spoke to him about Microlumbia because it was such a big part of me coming to CBS. And so I'm always more than happy to pay it forward. So yeah, please feel free to reach out if you have any more questions on the fund as well.
Thank you so much for offering that advice. I think that's great advice for prospective students to learn more from current students as they are researching the program. Pivoting to talk about Pangea advisors. So maybe Sandra, I think you mentioned this, but whoever wants to answer, do folks have the opportunity to specify their preference on a project, or is it something that gets assigned?
Pangea and also most of our other application programs, we always ask for preference, right? Whether you're applying individually or as a team, we don't like to force students to do anything. It should be based on what you're interested in, as well as a match with skill sets. And so often, for example, with Pangea, you might specify a first, second, and third preference. For 3 cans, the same thing. I think we ask for 2 preferences, and then if you don't get your first 2, we might offer you a third, but we're not going to force a team to work on something that they're not interested in. So definitely, this is about trying to triage the incredible opportunities that are in the world, but also, what all the MBA students are looking to get out of their experience. We want there to be a nice meeting of minds, because that makes for great project experiences.
Great. I think we have time maybe for one more question, and I'm going to wrap with one that we often get in admissions. So I think this is a good one to close on. I think, Dan, you actually mentioned this earlier, so I'll have you answer. In what ways do we engage with the broader West Harlem community now that we are on our new campus? What has come out of the Tamer Center? What initiatives?
This is very much the impetus of the Inclusive Entrepreneurship Initiative. That's why we started it. And it's in recognition that Columbia Business School is an intimidating presence. It's intimidating to me, and I have taught here for 10 years. Every time I step through the glass doors, I think that sometimes, what if my day, doesn't go quite right? What if, I think about, various insecurities that I have as well. And I can only imagine that over the past 20 years, as this piece of land in West Harlem was being developed, how the local community has been reacted. I've had personal experience with this, in that I was an undergraduate at Columbia when this plan was launched, and I've seen the news and followed the progress of breaking ground, as well as a lot of the protests in the local community about Columbia's presence here. I will even go out and say that as an undergrad, I was part of some of those protests as well. And so I've seen kind of the development of Columbia in this area for a long time. And now sitting as a faculty here on the very piece of land that long ago I protested, I also now kind of see that the issue is complex, but also pregnant with opportunity. It's something that I think about a lot in terms of what is it that our students, for example, can learn from engaging with local community organizations, business leaders, as well as political leaders as well. And so the impetus of our Inclusive Entrepreneurship Initiative is to work with organizations that are seeking to address issues and gaps in resources in small business, resources, for example, knowledge and other kinds of critical needs, and have our students kind of understand what those needs are and also learn about those needs. So much of inclusive entrepreneurship, in addition to building venture ecosystems, as well as to expose so many of our community members within Columbia Business School to a diverse range of issues, because it's really the kind of synthesis of different kinds of problems that lead to new innovations. And so a couple of the things that have come out of this initiative are kind of students working directly with an organization that is sponsored by the New York State government, but actually housed within Columbia Business School. It's called the Small Business Development Center. And this is a consultant center for any small business owner or aspiring entrepreneur in the local community. In particular, this is the West Harlem and Upper Manhattan community that the Small Business Development Center services, to come in for office hours to kind of talk about different resources that are available. If it's a minority or women-owned business, there's a certification that businesses can get to help lower their tax rates, to facilitate business entry. But the legal process, I'll tell you, for getting that certificate is Byzantine. And so what our development center does, as well as many of our students, is help local business owners and obtain that certification. That's just one example. In addition, our students also work directly with organizations that support, say, founders of businesses that are directly from the West Harlem community and also the South Bronx as well. our students don't just work with accelerators on the programming, but also directly with the founders themselves, helping consulting as well. And I think the most rewarding thing out of all of this is that in many ways, our students have been influenced. This is a hopeful outcome, but it's one that we've seen come to pass, which is that our students are directly impacted by this experiences. It's a learning experience for them. And they've realized in many ways that they can't help without learning first. And so that's a big takeaway for many folks that have gone through these programs in our halls as well. Our objective is to kind of expand this as well. Over this school year, one of our many goals is to work across campus. In this particular program is with Columbia Law School and JD students to create a set of venture clinics to meet local entrepreneurs and small business owners across Harlem and also the South Bronx, but also in other places in New York as well, such as Jackson Heights, and as well as Sunset Park, many different places that often are neglected and overlooked and marginalized. And so these are a couple of the ways that CBS is beginning to kind of build a kind of more a bigger bridge, one that is more inclusive of the local economy.
Thank you so much for sharing some tangible examples. I think it's great for folks to hear. So unfortunately, we have no time left, but we really appreciate all of our panelists' time sharing their experiences. And I hope that everyone found this to be fruitful. It is recorded and will be posted to our website. So please keep an eye out for that and stay tuned for additional opportunities to hear from key centers, programs, and initiatives at CBS in the coming weeks. But thank you all for being here. Huge thank you to our panelists from the Tamer Center. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us in admission should you have any questions about the application process or the MBA program. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you for joining us. Take care, everybody.